Ladies and gentlemen, I just finished watching The White Lotus Season 3, and I was contemplating on whether I should make a video about it or not, but I think I'm going to do it because honestly, this show is just such an incredible show. I know a lot of you guys may not even watch it, but I do have to say before we get into any spoilers or anything of the season, if you don't watch the show or you haven't seen it at all, you should 100% check it out. The story is, well, it's really hard to explain, so I'm not even going to bother to do that, but each season is just a very solid story of people staying at a hotel and something crazy happens at the end. It's kind of like Clue, but not like Clue. I don't know. Anyway, this show overall has had two banger seasons 1 and 2. Both were absolutely incredible. So obviously when season 3 came along, especially after the major thing that happened in season 2 with Tanya, people were skeptical, people were excited, and people were wondering what they were going to do. And when we saw it was going to be in Thailand and Belinda was going to be in the picture, there was a lot of excitement there. I know I was freaking out. I was very excited for it. And now the season has come and gone, and I have a lot of thoughts, naturally. So I understand completely that there is a lot of controversy for this season online. Some people hated this season. Some people really liked this season. And I'm just going to brain dump here by saying I'm kind of somewhere in the middle of this. I think definitively, you could say this is a fact. Season 3 of The White Lotus has the same sort of quality as the first two seasons. The character writing is absolutely phenomenal. No matter what you say about where it went or whatever, the way they write these stories are just so compelling, and they really just draw you to these characters that you barely know and make you want to stay with them forever. And every season has done that. From the family in season 1 in Hawaii to Tanya and all of the people from that entire group in general in season 2 to season 3, especially like the Ratliffs and all of those people, you just really didn't want to leave them. You wanted to stay with them the entire time. Like Rick and Chelsea were amazing. As I mentioned, the Ratliffs were great. The Greg story was great. All of it was good. And it's like when the season ends, you know you're probably never going to see most of these people again. Maybe there's some connective tissue. So I think this show still has that sort of quality where it makes you fall in love with the characters in such a unique way that no other show does in a one-season run. Don't know how to describe it, but that never went away here. This season obviously followed the same sort of thing as the other ones do. It's a group of people in Thailand this time. You have the Ratliff family, whose father is, I guess, like a hedge fund manager, a very famous one in New York, and his son takes after him, or is kind of, I guess, going to take over him. And they're just your classic, like, very rich, snobby family. The mom herself is just very out there. I literally know a lot of people in real life that are like that and stuff like that. So you have that very stereotypical rich family. You have Rick and Chelsea, who are an older guy, Walton Goggins, and his, I guess, girlfriend, and they are going there because essentially Rick wants to find the man who killed his father. So that's one story that's pretty interesting. You also have Belinda coming back into the picture. She's going to Thailand to like do a retreat thing for the White Lotus so she could learn more about all the stuff she does. So you have her coming back in the picture with her son, and you have just all of those elements which are really interesting. When they get to Thailand, it's discovered that Greg, the man who killed Tanya, who used to be married to Tanya, or maybe not killed, but indirectly killed Tanya, is there, and Belinda runs into him. So you got a lot of interesting things happening at once. And I just think, again, like I mentioned, I'm not going to harp on this forever, but the way they told these stories was still top notch. Nothing is going to change that. I would say this could be some of the best character writing in general. I didn't even mention that there's the whole group of like Jacqueline and all of those characters. Jacqueline's like the actress, and then her friends, her two friends, they're all another group there. So that's one other dynamic. But yeah, like I said, I just think this season arguably may have had the best character arcs out of any of the seasons. So this isn't to say that it was bad, but I don't know exactly how to pinpoint it realistically, but the finale is really where I want to focus a lot of my attention on this video, because there was a lot of really interesting things built up this season. Like obviously the Tim Ratliff thing, where he's found that he's been embezzling 10 million or something like that, and he knows that when his family finds out, it's going to be game over, and in general it's game over for him when he comes back to Thailand. So that leads him down a disastrous path of taking lorazepam and all sorts of stuff to try to cope with it and keep his family out of it. And he ultimately ends up making the decision that he's going to kill his family to spare them of that knowledge because they don't have their phones for the week. So they don't know any of this is going on except for him. And that's a really interesting dynamic. And then you also have, like I mentioned, the Rick and Chelsea storyline, which is a really interesting dynamic where Rick confronted the man who killed his father, and then it all plays out in the end. We're going to get to that in a second, but like there's some really interesting dynamics at play here. And it's not that I don't think they nailed them, because I don't think that's the case. Like, I genuinely do think they did a very good job with the way they wrapped everything up. Even to the point where a lot of this season was about evil taking over. That was a big focus of it. And like a lot of the decisions that were made with characters like Gatok, who him and Mook were the worst part of the season. We'll get to that at some point, but things like that where Gatok is a Buddhist, for instance, and he never kills, but then at the end he turns to evil by killing someone. Things like that just in general, and that spirituality was such a big focus of the season. I think it just nailed it on all of those fronts. But the way it got to those messages on like the surface level for people who don't really see the deeper picture of it, it just wasn't... I'm struggling to find the words to say. I guess it's because the last episode was an hour and 30 minutes. So it's a very long episode of TV. But the first hour and 10 minutes or so of it, nothing happened. And then they saved the last part of it for this big action sequence, which I just personally had a bit of a problem with, and I don't know how to word it. I don't know if it's that Mike White, who has done a phenomenal job with the show, but I don't know if it's that he's had a sense of the show's been very successful, so they need to build up these characters and like have some cohesive tissue. I don't know if it's that they think that people just really care about the big bang at the end. I don't know what it was, but when the shootout inevitably happened, it just kind of felt like forced and too fast, and then things just became honestly unbelievable. I don't really have a problem with the fact that it was revealed that Rick's father was the man he killed. Like, I don't think that's a problem. I thought that was actually pretty interesting. I just think it all went down so quickly, and it felt like behind the scenes in the writer's room, they were like, oh, we got to have a shootout scene. People have to die just because that's what the big thing with White Lotus is. But like, honestly, in a way, that's not exactly what the White Lotus is. And I hope these writers don't lose sight of what makes the show special. Because yes, on one hand, it's really interesting how each season there's been like a Clue style death, and we have to figure out who it's going to be and unravel that. That should stay the same. Maybe if it's not, it doesn't always have to be death though. You know what I mean? I just think these writers have been like, we got to have this twist. But the real special sauce with the White Lotus is the character development. It's fucking masterful. I don't know how else to word it. And it was really good this season, but then when it came to the conclusions of all of these character arcs, the only ones that I thought was really solid, like very emotional and very good, was Jacqueline's arc. Jacqueline, those three girls who's, I'm forgetting the name, I think it's Jacqueline, Kate, and I'm forgetting the other name, honestly. But that arc ended really well. That was a very powerful meaning. It was direct, and it felt the most natural to the White Lotus. But then like Rick's arc, which again, it was really interesting to see that the way it unfolded, but it just unfolded way too quickly. Albeit, yes, I felt horrible for Chelsea when she died. And I even felt bad when Rick died because he had just found out that it was his dad and all of that stuff. And that's a whirlwind of emotions. For it all to come crashing down that way was just really unfortunate, but it just, something didn't feel right. And then the fact that after the shootout happens, everyone goes back to complete normalcy. I thought that was really weird. Like, there was a whole shootout going on at the White Lotus, at like the Four Seasons in the real world of places. If that happened, that would be a massive deal. But right after the shootout happens, it's like nothing happened. They all get on a plane and live happily ever after, even the Ratliffs. It's like, what the fuck? I'm sorry, that just really bothered me. The way it didn't feel real, and I feel like the White Lotus is so much better at that. It just didn't, something just felt off there. I don't know how to describe it. That was just weird. So that was a problem of mine, but the bigger problem of mine was the Ratliff storyline, because honestly, for me, the Ratliffs were by far the most interesting element to this season. The dynamic with Timothy was just so fucking good. I don't know how else to word it. It really was just outstanding to see. And I heard Mike White talking about how this was based on an idea of some real life guy who something similar happened and he ended up killing his whole family. It's loosely based on it. Obviously, it's not exactly the same. It's just that story is so compelling and so interesting. And I loved everything that they did about it. Even the fact that Lachlan at the end ends up drinking it from the protein shake, which was stupid. And he kind of deserves it because who the fuck drinks from a dirty protein shake? Whatever. Anyway, or a blender, I should say. Everything, even up to the last 5 minutes of the episode, was really fucking solid with the Ratliffs. But then we get just no conclusion to it. Like, all of this was for him to be like, hey, there's going to be some changes when we get back home. Just be ready for that. And then everyone looks at their phone and they're like, oh shit. Bro, like, no. Like, I guess the problem is we know after 3 seasons of watching the show that the odds of us actually seeing the Ratliffs again are pretty much slim to zero because they just do this masterful work and then these characters, we never see them again. Like, but bro, this was such a big arc. Like, you can't just leave that. I'm not even joking. I would literally watch a whole spin-off show just on the Ratliff family about this trial. I'm like, not even kidding. That's how compelled I was in their development throughout this season. But just to leave it on, like, almost, it's not really a cliffhanger because they still ended these arcs very well. But, like, that's such a big thing to leave it on for us not to see. It almost felt like, and I heard this from some behind the scenes stuff between whether it was the actress who plays Chelsea, whose name I'm forgetting, or even Walton Goggins talking about it and stuff like that. But it seems to me that there was a lot that was cut out from the show. They were talking about how there were so many scenes shot that just didn't make the final cut. And I really do feel like that might be part of the problem here because, yeah, the episode was 1:30, but I feel like they probably needed to feel like they could have probably had like 2 hours of footage, not that they should have, of real legitimate answers to some of these questions or just to even flesh out the gunfight and things like that. But they just didn't. Like, we needed to see more from the Ratliffs. We needed to see what happened there, and we just didn't. And that sucks. I'm sorry. That just absolutely sucks. You nailed almost everything with the writing up until that point where it just felt like it was an afterthought, which it wasn't an afterthought. So I don't know, that was just that just did such a thing to me. Now I have to say there's one story arc that I thought was handled very well that I don't really have any problems with, and that was Belinda's. I thought Belinda's story arc was fantastic. It was really interesting to see her going from being really worried that Greg's there to eventually just really outsmarting the shit out of him, taking the money and running. I thought that was phenomenal, and the way that all went down was really good. And yeah, it's like unfortunate that this is like they're doing this like stomping over Tanya's grave almost, but she really came a long way and it was great to see. I have always loved Belinda as a character and I've loved the Greg storyline. So this has been really interesting, but Greg is that cohesive tissue that makes me think Mike White was like, well, we need to have some cohesive tissue here somehow. And I did love Greg, but it almost felt like forced. Like I don't know why. I just personally feel like they don't need that for it to be really good, even though I want to see more of Greg and I want to see more of Belinda and have some of that cohesive tissue. I don't have necessarily a problem with that. It's just at times it feels a little bit like you're raising your eyebrows. I don't know, but Belinda was great to me. I really enjoyed that. I liked that she got her bag and left with her son. I thought that was really cool. I really did. I genuinely enjoyed it. The one thing that I did not enjoy this season at all was Gaytok and Mook. Gaytok, I couldn't stand any of his shit. I'm sorry, I couldn't stand it. He was just such a fucking pussy. I don't know how else to word it. I just couldn't stand watching him on screen. Everything he did pissed me off, and Mook is like the worst character ever. All she did, the entire time, all she did was say, you need to do something, you need to hurt someone. Like shut up. Stop. Is this really what we value in a relationship? Really? Like, come on, I'll be your relationship advocate here. I'll be your relationship coach, okay? I'm just joking. Could you imagine? Jesus Christ. But seriously, it was just so cringy to watch, bro. It was insane. It was so annoying every time they cut to them. And I'm not gonna lie, even the subtitles and the fact that the subtitles had the language behind it. I'm sorry, I'm blanking on the names here, but it was just hard to even read. It wasn't fun to watch. Yeah, sure, it was kind of cool at the end when Gatok had this moment where he turned away from Buddhism to kill someone. That was interesting for sure, but the whole reason he did it was just stupid in the first place. And it's nothing against the actor and actress who played them. I know the actress is like a very famous K-pop star or something like that. Like, but it feels like they just wasted her character, and it wasn't her acting fault because she did a phenomenal job. And so did Gatok actually did a phenomenal job. Outstanding acting. It's just the character arc there just was so not fun to watch. And it sucks because I feel like they could have had a really interesting idea there. And again, I just feel like it got kind of scrapped last minute. I don't know why. That's how I feel about the whole season. It just feels like all of the ideas that they had were really good, but then some of it just got scrapped or like something changed. I don't know. And I gotta be honest, I'm making it sound like this was a bad season. I genuinely don't think it was. I know a lot of people have been saying online that this wasn't a good season. They were bored. My girlfriend was just telling me that she thought this season was boring and that she didn't enjoy it, didn't think it was a good season. I don't personally agree with that and the sentiment online. I think it did some of the best camera work. Honestly, like the cinematography was outstanding. The bokeh on the characters and how that showed emotion was crazy. Like it was so good, especially with the Ratliffs at the end. The lens they use, I think they used like one of those like anamorphic lenses where the bokeh was just insane around him. And it looked like everything was like twirling just to show like his state of emotion. That's such good visual storytelling. So the cinematography was incredible. Like absolutely incredible. And also the acting was phenomenal. And the character work, I think may have been the best of all 3 seasons. I'm not going to lie. I think the show in that regard keeps getting better. It's just when it came to some of these items, I'm not sure how I felt. I don't know if this makes sense to you guys, but I had to spill the beans on how I feel about The White Lotus. It's a show I absolutely love that doesn't really have a place that much on this channel, but I had to talk about it because I've been dying to scream it. You know what I mean? Been dying to do it. So here, that's what I did. So yeah, let me know your thoughts on The White Lotus Season 3 down below. And with all that out of the way, thank you again so much for watching this video. Consider becoming a channel member and subscribe if you haven't already. And with all that out of the way, thanks again so much for watching this video. Until the next one, I'll talk to you later. Peace out.